So are there ways to accumulate sleep inertia before going to bed? Technically no, but I think I know what you're referring to. So sleep inertia is the process that drives us from light sleep into deep sleep and then REM sleep. And this process really only occurs during sleep. However, what I think you might be referring to is what's often referred to as sleep pressure. And this is that feeling of fatigue and actually desire for sleep at the end of the day that allows us to easier go from wakefulness into sleep. And sleep pressure is driven by a specific neurochemical in the brain called adenosine. And adenosine is actually a byproduct of ATP breakdown. And ATP is simply the energy we use to power every single reaction inside the body. So ATP is adenosine triphosphate, and it has one adenosine molecule with 3 phosphates attached. And these phosphates are bonded together, and every time we break one of these bonds, we release energy that's used to power a cellular reaction. So the most energy comes when we take adenosine triphosphate, break the bond between the second and third phosphate molecule, leaving us with an inorganic phosphate, meaning just a phosphate without anything attached, and adenosine diphosphate, or adenosine with 2 phosphates attached. And then we do the same process of breaking the bond between the first and second phosphate to leave us with adenosine monophosphate. And finally, we break off that last phosphate group, and this leaves us with adenosine. And adenosine has receptors in both the brain and the body, and the majority of its functions are really to slow us down and promote the signals of tiredness, and also dampen down the signals of wakefulness. And as I discussed, adenosine is really a byproduct of energy utilization, meaning the more energy you use in a specific day, the more adenosine you will accumulate, and this is why you'll likely feel more tired after running a marathon than you would after sitting the entire day. So tip number 1 is try and be as active as possible. However, one of, if not the most important factors for adenosine accumulation is simply the amount of time that you spend awake. Adenosine begins accumulating in the morning and peaks at night, and sleep is actually the process of flushing the adenosine out of the receptor. So we wake up again in the morning without this sleep pressure. And this is why I often recommend against sleeping in the morning. And this is simply because if you go to bed at the same time every night, but you sleep in a little bit further, you'll simply spend less time awake before the next time you plan to go to bed. For example, if you sleep in an extra 2 hours on Sunday, but go to bed at the same time Sunday night, you would not have been awake for as long, and you likely would not have accumulated as much sleep pressure. And this can make it difficult to fall asleep on time, and this becomes detrimental if you have an early Monday morning alarm clock like most people do. So if you're going to actually get more sleep, I would actually recommend trying to go to sleep a little bit earlier. However, I think one of the most important things about adenosine is that caffeine is an adenosine antagonist. So basically, caffeine binds to the adenosine receptor, but doesn't do anything. All it does is hog up the receptor so adenosine can't bind to it and actually stimulate the receptor. And this is how caffeine makes us a little bit more energetic and wakeful. Not only does it increase some of the energetic signals, but it simply mutes some of the tiredness promoting signals that would have been sent if adenosine was sitting in the receptor. And if caffeine is in the receptor too close to bedtime or while we're trying to go to sleep, then we won't feel this sleep pressure to fall asleep. Even though it's accumulated, we don't perceive it. And this is actually one of the reasons that people get an afternoon crash after a large bolus of caffeine in the morning. Adenosine will always accumulate no matter whether caffeine is in the body or not. However, caffeine blocks adenosine from binding to its receptor, so the brain and the body don't perceive the presence of adenosine. However, once that caffeine wears off and is metabolized, the adenosine will quickly bind to the receptor and will get a sudden hit of all these tiredness promoting signals. However, if we time it correctly, and this occurs at the end of the night, this could actually be great because it allows us to stay awake all day and still have the sleep pressure from adenosine at night. And this is why I simply recommend trying to cut off caffeine as early as possible. In my opinion, it's much better to maybe have an hour or two of slight grogginess at the end of the day, rather than being overstimulated and not being able to fall asleep. And the best of both worlds is not to have to use caffeine at all. But no matter what, this adenosine will accumulate throughout the day, and as long as caffeine isn't present at the end of the night, the more energy that you utilize throughout the day, the more sleep pressure you'll have. And just recapping on the earlier point, the longer you've been awake, so trying to have a specific time where you wake up and you go to bed is going to be beneficial for staying awake for the same amount of time each day. So I really think this means doing both physically and cognitively demanding tasks. But there's also a bunch of other things, such as making sure that you're really timing your circadian pattern where you're waking up early in the morning and maybe watching the sunrise, and limiting a lot of bright light exposure late at night. This allows your body to produce other sleep promoting chemicals, such as melatonin. So, one of the biggest tips is being consistent every single day and trying to have the same type of pattern with your meals, sleep, workout, etc. And some people enjoy this and some people don't, so you have to figure out what's right for you. However, I'm simply just telling you what would be optimal. With that being said, I hope this helped, and if you have any other questions, please let me know.